Welcome to our OSHA Focal Point series. I'm Dr. John Mulroy, Director of the Pennsylvania OSHA Consultation Program, housed in the world-renowned Safety Sciences Department here at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. These videos were created with the essential, need-to-know OSHA compliance information to supplement your safety and health training. Addressing OSHA's most frequently cited standards, like lockout-tagout, fall protection, hazard communication, and machine guarding, these videos can help your organization anticipate, identify, evaluate, and control workplace safety and health hazards. We hope these critical OSHA focal points assist you in preventing future injuries and illnesses. If you still have questions or you need no-cost OSHA compliance assistance, we're here to help. All you need to do is reach out to us at IUP using the link below and request this no-cost OSHA compliance assistance service. It's that easy. Thank you for choosing the Focal Points video series. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to be the first to know when new safety and health content is added to this channel. Have a safe day, everyone. Today's topic is emergency action plans and fire prevention plans. And the purpose of today's topic is to provide you with the essential need-to-know information about the hazards associated with emergency action plans. During this short presentation, we will briefly discuss the following topics, which include: what constitutes an emergency action plan? What are the elements of a fire prevention plan? When is evacuation necessary? What's an effective emergency escape route? And what is shelter in place? So the purpose of an emergency action plan is to cover reasonably expected emergencies that occur specifically in your workplace. It describes the actions that need to be taken to ensure that all employees, all visitors, all contractors are safe during any emergency event. And it uses floor plans and maps to show emergency escape routes. The elements of an emergency action plan include how to report an emergency, the procedures that you as a worker need to follow, what escape routes are accessible, procedures for critical operation of equipment, accounting for employees, visitors, and contractors, what rescue and medical duties need to be performed by workers, and who needs to be contacted in the event of an emergency. As part of your emergency action plan, training is essential. So you need to know what your role and your responsibility is in any emergency event in the workplace. We need to know what the threats, our hazards, and the protective actions that we need to take in an emergency. How do we notify? How do we warn other workers, visitors, and contractors? And how do we communicate with the outside world during an emergency event? If we are evacuating, how do we locate our coworkers, our visitors, and our contractors? How are we using the emergency equipment that's provided by our employer? And what procedures do we need to follow? How do we respond? How do we evacuate? How do we shelter in place? How do we assemble outside? And how do we account for the workers? And lastly, what are our shutdown procedures for any essential equipment? Emergency action plan procedures can include methods of reporting an emergency, such as pull stations, telephones, walkie-talkies, instructions for exiting the facility, and instructions for helping those coworkers who suffer limited mobility. Fire prevention plans are a little bit different. Fire prevention plans must be in writing, they need to be kept available in the workplace, and available to any employee for their review. An employer must ensure that the employees are aware of all potential fire hazards when they're initially assigned to a job. And the employer must review with each of those affected employees all components of the fire prevention plan. In our fire prevention plan, we need to discuss what our major fire hazards are that are specific to our workplace, how we handle and how we store any hazardous materials, how we control any potential ignition sources, and what fire protection equipment is available to us. As part of that fire prevention plan, we need to make sure that we understand what the procedures are to control any flammable or combustible waste and maintain the safeguards that are available to us in our workplace to prevent heat-producing equipment from creating a potential fire hazard. We need to understand what a fire is. So a fire is a rapid chemical reaction. It's an oxidation, and it requires the following elements: oxygen, an ignition source, fuel, and a chemical reaction. This results in the release of heat, light, flames, and smoke. Potential ignition sources include open flames, smoking, static electricity, hot work activities such as welding, cutting, and burning, any thermal or heated surfaces, electrical and mechanical sparks, and lightning. Tasks that may require fire protection include hot work. Welding, burning, and cutting outside of any designated area requires a fire watch. dispensing any flammable and combustible liquids, and ensuring that we have proper grounding for that equipment, and handling any hazardous waste such as solvents, oily rags, or flammable liquids. If we're handling flammable materials, we need to only use approved medical safety containers. We need to ensure that we are practicing good housekeeping. These containers need to stay closed when they're not in use. We got to ensure that we never block any of our exits or passageways, and we keep any flammable materials away from potential ignition sources. What type of personal protective equipment may you need to have? From a fire prevention perspective, that type of equipment might include flame-resistant clothing, thermal gloves, hard hats, and face shields. Fire suppression equipment may include portable fire extinguishers or fixed system, including hoses. Let's talk a little bit about evacuation. Evacuation from your workplace may be necessary from fires, explosions, releases of hazardous materials, a radiological or a biological incident that occurs in the workplace, civil disturbances outside of our workplace, and lastly, workplace violence. We may also need to evacuate as a result of a natural emergency, which includes floods and earthquakes, tornadoes and hurricanes, potential hazardous winter weather, and wildfires. Factors affecting response to emergencies include the type of emergency or the extent of that emergency situation, where it's located specifically within our own facility, the type of building in which we are working in, and how we shut down critical operations. So in a fire emergency, do we fight that fire or do we flee? This is an essential question. Our options include one of the following four. We may elect a total evacuation. Instead, option two, we may have designated employees who are authorized to remain behind to fight a fire while the rest of us evacuate. A third option includes all employees on site are authorized to fight that fire. Or lastly, we provide portable fire extinguishers, but we don't intend our employees to use them. So we need to do a risk assessment in order to answer this question: do we stay and fight or do we flee? If we are designated employees who are expected to remain behind to fight this fire, we need to ask ourselves, is the fire too big? Is the air we're breathing hazardous? Is the environment we are in too hot or too smoky? Or is our evacuation path potentially blocked? Evacuation maps are an essential part of an emergency action plan. They need to show exits, at least two ways in and out with a primary and a secondary exit, where we're going to assemble outside for accountability, where we are located on that map, and other additional information that's important, such as location of fire extinguishers or pull stations. Part of our evacuation plan needs to ensure that we have an alarm or an annunciator to alert employees that an evacuation is necessary. We need to have a procedure in place to ensure that we can properly and fully account for any workers, visitors, or contractors that are located at our facility. And during the emergency event, we want to make sure that we have the ability to inform employees to ensure that when it's all clear that signal is provided and it's safe to re-enter, or we will remain at the assembly point. Shelter in place. There may be an occasion, and it may be specific to your workplace, where shelter in place is necessary. This may include a release of a chemical, biological, or a radiological contaminant. It may be a severe weather event, such as a tornado, or other site-specific situations that can occur both inside the workplace and outside. For sheltering in place, we need to be able to take refuge in an interior room with few or no windows. If the emergency is outside of our facility, we may receive instruction from local authorities to shelter in place. So we need to follow our emergency action plan shelter in place procedures if that's the case. If we are going to shelter in place, we need to alert our employees that that's the expected action. We need to be able to account for who is in that refuge, and we need a means to keep employees informed. Exit routes. Exit routes need to be continuous and unobstructed for the entire path. That includes the access, the exit, and the exit discharge to outside our workplace. They need to be clearly marked. Exits and exit paths need to be well lit. They need to be wide enough and unobstructed. So the basic exit route requirements include that they are permanent, that they're separated by fire-resistant materials, that there's limited openings, that there's an adequate number of exit routes available in our workplace, that the exit discharge leads directly outside to a safe place, The exit door is unlocked from the inside and side hinged. We cannot use garage doors as an exit. We need to ensure that there's an adequate capacity and the minimum height and width requirements are met. There are 3 elements of an escape route: ensuring that we have exit access along that pathway, that we have exits that are near to us from all points within the building, and the pathway leads us away from the structure itself. Here's an example of a map that may be part of your emergency action plan. All the essential elements are included on this map, including an assembly area and your primary and secondary exit routes. It may also show that you are here. So we want to ensure that we designate our primary and secondary exits. We want to ensure that there's no exits in our restrooms. We want to ensure that the exit away from rooms with any hazardous materials. We want to ensure that our emergency exits don't lead into a narrow passageway. We want to make sure that exit signs indicate the safe path of travel. We want to ensure that we have a designated assembly area for all workers, visitors, and contractors to collect. We want to ensure that nobody uses an elevator in order to reach an emergency exit. And for workers with limited mobility, we want to ensure that our exits have wheelchair access. And again, an essential element of this plan is to indicate your current location and the path of travel that you need to take to safely exit the facility. To get more help with emergency action plans and fire prevention plans, go to OSHA.gov. Thank you.